So, first of all, but I would like to ask you about the tensions between Moscow and Stockholm, about the situation which a lot of Russian newspapers, media outlets call the big scandal. Is this so? I mean, how important is that?
No, you could describe it in different ways, but what has happened is, and it's part of what you see from other European countries as well, that we have thought there has been an oversized presence at the Russian embassies. Significant part of that has been intelligence personnel. And in the situation that we have now, that is something that we consider sort of dangerous from our security. So there has been a deliberate effort to sort of ask some of them to leave different stages. And that is now happening. And that has led to, as expected, Moscow taking retaliatory measures against the Swedish diplomatic presence, primarily closing down our Consulate-General in Saint Petersburg, which is regrettable, but that's where we are.
Does it influence anyhow, I don't know, the citizens of Sweden in Russia? Do you think that there would be some consequences, serious consequences?
Not really. The tragic effect is, of course, that if you talk about the Swedish citizens in Russia, there are not very many of those. And while the function of the embassy in the past was, of course, to maintain a diplomatic dialogue and further commerce and all of those things, Mr. Putin's war has stopped most of that. It's still important to maintain, I think, a diplomatic presence in Moscow and to accept a Russian diplomatic presence in Stockholm. But the Russian embassy is now sort of down in size quite considerably. And the Consulate-General of Russia in Gothenburg is being closed down as well. I think that is primarily because they couldn't afford it any longer, but anyhow. So there's a significant reduction, but that significant reduction, what is of substance there is primarily the reduction in Russian intelligence personnel in Sweden and other countries.
Mm-hmm. So this incident with Sweden is not the only one. I mean, it's one of hundreds, I would say. The level of diplomatic relations, any relations between Russia and the West is, I don't know, very low, let's say very, very low. Do you think that there are some chances in the foreseeable future to rebuild those relationships? Is there a possibility?
Well, first, I think it's important, even in the sort of most dire circumstances, that's what we're having at the moment, to maintain the possibility of diplomatic dialogue, the possibility of political dialogue. So to have an ambassador in Moscow is important for us. To have a Russian ambassador here is, I guess, of some importance, or could be of some importance. I don't see very much is happening through the diplomatic channels at the moment due to the war. Long term, we all hope that the war will end, that Russia will accept that it has to respect Ukraine, and that we'll have the possibility of rebuilding relationships in the future, commercial and personal, and primarily, I would say, our Consulate-General in St. Petersburg. We've been in St. Petersburg. We were thrown out by Stalin, by the way, in the late 1930s, then restored that, I think, in the late 1950s or something like that. And it's been sort of somewhat difficult at times. But for us, it's been important to have a presence in St. Petersburg as well.
If we talk about the wider picture, so we've met at different conferences. And I mean, I know that you talk to people, very different people in the West. And you guys discuss very often, and I do, the place of Russia in this new world. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure about the total isolation, which has been mentioned so many times by the Western leaders. It actually dictates its narrative to some parts of the world. Is Russia strong right now, in your opinion, or it's getting weaker?
Well, it's obviously getting weaker because the war is consuming a lot of resources. The wars are very expensive, both in purely financial terms and in terms of human lives. I mean, I was staggered, I have to say, when Mr. Prigozhin said that Bakhmut has cost the Wagner Group 20,000 soldiers. I mean, to spend months after months reducing a not very significant town to rubble at the expense of 20,000 lives. That's fairly horrendous. So of course, all of this is weakening Russia, and Russia is trying to transition to a war economy. War economy, by definition, is not going to produce the prosperity that a peace economy can. And then cutting itself off from all that is the West, from Europe and America, and significant part of also East Asia. I mean, that's a price there that is going to be fairly severe. Regrettable, but Mr. Putin started this war.
Okay, but when we talk about Erdogan, I would not say a friend, but he is a partner of Vladimir Putin, and he is quite close to him. They meet very often. So Russia was actively supporting, not officially, but actively supporting Erdogan at this elections. So is he bringing Turkey closer to Russia right now? There are so many experts saying that there would be some changes in Turkish policy. It's not a democracy right now, but it would be even worse. Would you agree? Is Turkey becoming a new Russia?
I don't think it's becoming a new Russia, but you are right to point out that while they had the election, it was a free election, but it was grossly unfair. Because, of course, Mr. Erdogan controlled all of the media and controlled a lot of other assets. So it was certainly not a fair election, although it was free. The relationship with Russia is a complicated one. They are on very opposite ends of the issues in Syria, which are extremely important from the Turkish point of view, with millions of refugees and all of the uncertainty associated with that. And if you go back in time, there's even been, you remember the Turks shot down a Russian aircraft a couple of years ago, and Mr. Putin was not particularly thrilled by that. But they have found each other on certain issues. I mean, Russia is building a nuclear power station. Turkey is dependent on gas. Turkey has been negotiating or been part of negotiating for the deal on grain from Ukraine to the world markets. But at the same time, Ukraine has been delivering drones and other sort of equipment, war equipment, and has been very supportive of Ukraine in diplomatic terms. So it's a complicated relationship, but clearly an increasingly close one.
It is complicated, but still, we can see how, I mean, at the end of the day, Erdogan is, for example, blocking Swedish NATO membership and plays the game which Vladimir Putin likes. What are prospects from this point of view? Do you think that he will be able to be a part, Erdogan, will be able to be a part of civilized world? Turkey is a member of NATO, but it is actually a problem. And European Union and other Western allies cannot do anything with this.
Well, there are things that can be done, but you're right to put the question, where is Turkey heading? And we simply don't know. There was a fair amount of fairly fierce anti-Western rhetoric in the election campaign, and clearly Mr. Erdogan wants to present himself as a strong man against the rest of the world, the resurrection of Turkish strength in the world in different sort of ways. At the same time, highly dependent upon the West, and nearly half of the population voted for something utterly different. It's a Turkey that is divided between the more conservative, nationalist, nostalgic Turkey, you can say, of Mr. Erdogan, and a modern, Western, fairly competent and progressive ones looking west. So it's going to be one of the major challenges for the European Union and for the US to manage the relationship with Turkey in the years ahead.
Do you think you can rely, the Western world, can rely on Erdogan? I mean, can he be a partner? Is he still a partner?
On certain issues, I guess it can be. On other issues, I would put a big question mark on it. And we'll have to watch very carefully the direction of his policies. There's been a strengthening, if you look at the election result, of what you could call the nationalist segment of the Turkish political environment. And exactly where that takes Turkey remains to be seen. We should not forget that the number one issue in Turkey at the moment is a very profound economic crisis. And how he deals with that is going to be very important. At worst, he will be forced to go begging to the IMF, that is to the West, for financial support. And we'll have to accept the conditionality associated with that. To avoid that, he needs to make a fairly major U-turn in economic policy, also directing himself more to the West in terms of the economic issues. So that is, I think, the big issue that we need to follow in Turkey in the days, weeks, and months ahead.
So when you think about this terrible economic crisis which we are witnessing in Turkey, and we also see that inflation is just, I mean, astonishing, right? It's 200% of inflation. Simultaneously, I think about Russia, of course, and going back to the situation in Russian Federation. And this is the final question. Don't you think that economical problems do not directly lead to the changes in the country? It has not happened in Turkey. So obviously Russia doesn't have this kind of inflation. If it has, it's not guaranteed that this kind of problems would lead to, you know, people protesting, changing something. I mean, it doesn't give you a hope, isn't it?
Not necessarily. You're right in saying that an economic crisis will have severe political consequences inside the country, and will force a major reorientation of policies, including the parts of foreign affairs. But it doesn't lead to sort of a regime change necessarily, except in the most extreme of circumstances. Take the collapse, but that was associated with war in Russia prior to 1917. But that's a rather unique situation. We'll see where it takes it. It's very different with Turkey has, as you pointed out, enormous inflation. I think they're running out of money. They do have reserves, but they're running out of them. Russia has, to some extent, a better situation in the sense that one still has sort of oil and to a certain extent gas. Turkey is the other way. It doesn't have anything of this. It might have it long term. So one is severely affected by that. Russia is, of course, affected by the fact that its industrial sector is highly integrated, or was highly integrated with the West. And to get out of that will be complicated. I don't expect that to be in 1917 in Russia, but it will be a very difficult situation.
When? When do you think it's happening? Well, I'm not calling for the difficult situation. I'm just trying to give our audience the prospect, right? I mean, the sanctions are, I don't know, are they working actually?
Well, you can make another comparison, which I think is more appropriate, and that is the comparison with Iran. Iran has been under severe sanctions for quite some time. Iran is still there, but you can see that the standard of living and everything in the country has deteriorated significantly during those years. The regime is there with increased repression of different sorts. Increasing number of Iranians are relocating to other countries. So it's a country that slides down the scale of countries and slides down the scale of countries in terms of prosperity and living standards and possibilities for the individual, and compensate that by repression. Will that happen in Russia? I don't know, but that's clearly one of the scenarios ahead for the country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bildt.
Thank you.
TV Rain has started broadcasting in English so that you could get news about Russia, the war in Ukraine, and Russian society directly from the source.
Russia's military is unable to stop Ukrainian forces.
The Kremlin's newest propaganda target is now the LGBT community.
TV Rain channel has been shut down in Russia many times. The last one happened at the beginning of March, when the war started.
Мы временно приостанавливаем работу телеканала.
We survived, started working from Europe, and now we are watched by millions of people every day, for whom we are the only TV station that tells the truth about the war. Subscribe to our English channel TV Rain Newsroom on YouTube.